Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be discussing Solaris by Stanislaw Lem. What an astonishing read. So many relevant questions asked in such a short book, and for me it's what science fiction can deliver at its very best. So in the tradition of The Forever War by Joe Haldeman, Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card, I'll link to both of those in the description. This is another first contact book, but instead of being between mankind and a race of creatures, this is between mankind and a planet that revolves around a two-star system. And not just the planet, but specifically an ocean on the planet. And it seems to be a sentient ocean. It seems to be an ocean that understands things. One of the techniques that Lem uses in the text, which I find wonderful, much like Frank Herbert does in his Dune series, Lem invents documentation about this universe. So as you can see, the planet itself is called Solaris. The people who study it are called Solarists. And there's all sorts of literature about it. So Lem, inside this text, quotes other, obviously fictional texts that he made up to fill up this universe about how people have thought about Solaris as time has gone on. Obviously, this was a discovery that people made. They went out there and they were trying to figure out, well, how does this ocean, this planet work? And there's different theories and there was different experimentation. And it's fascinating to see that him use different types of literature, whether it's a short scientific study or apocrypha or, the theories of so-and-so that are collated into an anthology. He references them. The reader then feels like he or she is discovering them along with the protagonist in here. So what are the challenges? Well, if you don't like a lot of science in your science fiction, this is definitely not the book for you. This is not wars in space with battleships. There's a lot of descriptions of different processes that are happening, and even more interestingly, you'll see the scientific method at work. Which, when the scientific method is actually used, it's one of the greatest things that we can use to discover things about ourselves and about the universe, which is, does this theory hold up? So I have a theory about something, I test it. If it works, keep going. If it doesn't work, discard what doesn't work, keep what works, and use that to rebuild your theory, and then restart the scientific method. So there's a lot of, shall we say, science language in here, or a description of a process, or the description of how the ocean generates something physical that can then be observed, or generates different modalities. So the book is not a fast-moving book. And in a sense, it's like God Emperor of Dune. I'll put it in that category, and I'll put a card to that. It's a philosophical book, really. It's just, you could say the action of the book is a lot of thinking. And because the action of the book is mostly thinking and only in part a love story, it's been hard to capture on screen. So I'm going to do something, just as speaking of experiments, scientific method, trying something. So I'm going to do an experiment for this science fiction book by doing a free review of the two films that have been attempted of this. The 2003 Steven Soderbergh film with George Clooney and Natasha McElhone, and the 1972 Andrei Tarkovsky film. So I'm going to watch both of those. I'm going to do a review. I'll put a link in the description below. It'll go to my Patreon page. It'll be free, so you don't have to be a paid member, but it'll just be a way for me to find out how interested are people in my Patreon, and then also how interested are they in my doing film reviews, which something I've done in different mediums, but not on this channel. But it's a way for us to tie in with this book. How can I capture intellectual ideas? And I think, for example, in the Soderbergh film, this is a bit of a preview, they focus a bit more on the love story and a lot less on the intellectual discussions that are going on in the text. So yes, there is a love story here, and I don't want to downplay that, but it's inexorably tied up with what's going on in the book. Meaning the humans are trying to communicate with the ocean through different means, broadcasting into it, touching it with things, and the ocean could be trying to communicate back to the humans, but the form of communication is so abstract that real understanding is difficult. So if I'm, as a human, talking to another human and we don't speak the same language, we might use hand signals, we could draw things, we could find a way to communicate. But when you're talking about an ocean and a human, and the way that language is expressed and the gap in intelligence is so enormous, it becomes much harder. So that's one of the things that is going on here, is the ocean is able to somehow probe the mind of our protagonist, Kelvin, and is able to create an incarnation of his dead wife. And without spoiling too much more, that's part of the story and the discovery that Kelvin is going through and trying to understand what is going on with Solaris at this particular time. But another question that's being asked is in space exploration itself. What is humanity seeking out there in the universe? If it's exploration just for exploration's sake, is that really worthwhile? This is a question I often ask people who are big Mars advocates. And I wonder if they're just interested in exploration for exploration's sake. When I say, why are we interested in going to a planet that's a quarter the size of Earth and is uninhabitable? I understand the idea of pushing yourself and pushing your limits, but there also has to be a purpose for it. I'm not just going to do something for doing it. There has to be something greater beyond that. That's always the famous questions like, why are you climbing a mountain? Because it's there. That's never really the reason. If you're familiar with the mountaineering genre and you've ever read any books written by these men, it's never quote unquote just because it's there. There's something deeper that people are going through. So I think that part of the excitement about going to Mars is it allows people to escape the present. They can, instead of dealing with the problems of their life, their nation, their community, their family, they can put themselves into a mythical future where they can start from zero and everything will be better, because what's the problem is everything, all these rules that have come up and these cultural constructs and all this other nonsense. And when we start over in Mars, it'll be better. But and something else in the genre, which I'll also put in the description, is The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Robert Heinlein. That if we could just create another society, things could be really different. But this is, such an enduring fantasy, the start over fantasy. And the reason that it's a fantasy is because wherever we as humanity go, or as individuals, we bring ourselves. We don't bring a rebooted version of ourselves. And so the question is, what is it that mankind is seeking? Let's stay in Solaris's paradigm. If we're going out to these other planets, what is it that we are seeking? Are we just seeking to impose mankind on the rest of the universe? Or are we trying to go somewhere and learn? And if you can take that lesson from this fictional universe and drag it all the way back to the present and to your life right now, I think that question has to be for yourself. What is it that you are seeking when you travel? Are you seeking to reinforce your ideas and your beliefs and what it is that you think about things? Or are you genuinely seeking to cultivate a student mind that is open to learning and understanding? Now, keep in mind, learning and understanding, it doesn't mean accepting or endorsing or promoting. It means knowing. What you do with that knowledge is what is important, but you cannot even accept that knowledge if you haven't cultivated a space for it. And I think that's one of the enduring messages of Solaris for me, is the idea of, even in your failure to communicate with this other life, this other entity, this other type of sentience, have I created a space within myself in which I could understand? And or in creating that space, can I gain greater insights into myself such that even if I fail to communicate with the entity, I still learned something? And that should be the object of scientific exploration. That should be the object of understanding yourself, is that you're not outcome driven. You're not saying, I want this. What you're seeking is the knowledge itself and following where that knowledge will take you. So there's actually much more I could say about the book, but I just want to keep it at that. And as I say, we'll talk more about some of these ideas in the film review that, like I said, will be linked in the description. If you want to buy this book, there's a description. That's one way you can. There's a link to it in the description. That's one way you can support the channel. You can also support it by becoming a member of my Patreon, joining the YouTube members. You'll get early releases of videos like this one. You can send me something from my Amazon wish list, which, as I say, will probably be something that I will cover in 2025. But in 2024, a portion of the proceeds of all of my reviews, the different ways that people send me money, you could send a super thanks, for example, a portion of that's going to go to the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. It's a organization that helps get medical care to Palestinian children who would not otherwise be able to receive it. I think it's a great cause. If you either go to their website to support them directly or support them indirectly through supporting my channel, the funds will be well used. As always, enjoy your reading.